Hey, in today's video you can expect to watch a lightning lesson that we did together with Sergio Visinoni last year. You learn all about what exactly is a fractional CTO, how to become one, and what fractional CTOs do on a daily basis. Let's get straight into it. Oh, hey everyone. We still have people joining. People will still be joining in a couple of minutes more, but I have disabled now the waiting room, so everyone can join directly. But yeah, welcome everyone to this lightning lesson. It's called How Fractional CTOs Make a Huge Impact on 30% of Time. I'm really excited to also have Sergio Visinoni with us as well, co-hosting this lightning lesson. Before we get into more details, let me ask you, all of you guys, from which country you guys are calling. You can enter your country in the chat. And also, this kind of events are always great for networking purposes. And if you want to share your LinkedIn, if you want to share your Twitter or your X profile, make sure to share it in the chat as well, because we meet like-minded people in such events, and we can connect with each other, and we will be in contact even after the lesson ends. So don't only connect with us, with me and Sergio, but connect also with each other. So make sure to share your LinkedIn profiles, X, whatever you like to share on the chat as well. I see a lot of people from Europe. Awesome. I see also United States, the Netherlands. Yeah, it's a big day for United States today because we have election, I believe, today. I was contemplating a little bit, should we keep this lightning lesson for today or not, because it's an election day, but decided to still keep it on this day. Awesome. All right, before we go into specific details of what we are going to talk about, I just want to do a brief introduction about myself. My name is Gregor. I am a CTO, and also I'm an author of Engineering Leadership newsletter. I have over 10 years of experience in the engineering industry, and I also post daily on LinkedIn. And with me today is Sergio. Sergio, would you say a few words about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Greg, for the invite, and happy to see you all here. My name is actually Sergio because I'm Italian, even though I live in Spain. But I've been moving around. No worries about that. I'm used to my name being called in different ways. I have about 20 years of experience in the tech industry, and most of them, like 10 plus years, have been in engineering leadership. I also write a newsletter, which is called Sudo Make Me a CTO. I do post a bit less regularly than Greg on LinkedIn, and among the things I do these days is different contract work, including some fractional CTO gigs. That's why we're here to talk about this.
Awesome. I have also pasted Sergio's newsletter, Make Me a CTO. It's a great read. So make sure to subscribe to his newsletter. Okay, so let's get into the agenda. What are we going to talk about today? So we're going to talk about first, obviously, we already did the intro. What is a fractional CTO and how do you become one? That's going to be the first agenda topic. And then we're going to talk about the key skills needed to thrive in the role. And also we're going to talk about tips on how you can learn and practice the key skills needed. And also make sure we're gonna have some time for Q&A at the end of the session. And also, if there's gonna be any specific questions, we could potentially pick up some questions as well from the chat. So if you have any questions, just put it in the chat, and you can also upvote the specific questions that you feel that are very relevant. And that would give us like more more feedback that it's a really good question that a lot of people are interested in. So yeah, this session is like meant to be very interactive. So we might pick up some questions in the middle of the session, but we will also have some time at the end of the session. Okay, so but also I want to mention as well that we will pick one question from you guys, and there's going to be a giveaway. It's going to be a free t-shirt for one of the questions. So more questions than better, and one of you guys will receive a free t-shirt from us. Okay, let's go straight to our first question, and we're gonna separate this into two-part questions. So the first one is what actually is a fractional CTO. So, Sergio, what is a fractional CTO?
Um, that's a very difficult question, right? So there's a lot of talks about fractional CTOs these days, and sometimes I have the feeling that it's used as a label for part-time CTO, just a fancy way to call a part-time CTO. In my view, and I think that there's not a absolute definition in the industry, right? But the way I see it is a way for companies who can't afford to pay for a very experienced CTO full time to access to that experience, but actually compromising on the time availability, right? Instead of compromising on experience, quality, expertise, they want to have that expertise, but they're happy to have it only part time. And then, of course, you need to come up with arrangements to deal with what happens when the fractional CTO is not actually on the engagement. So that's the way I think about it.
Yeah. Well, very good description, I would say. You get a very experienced person. Normally, a fractional CTO is someone that has done a lot of stuff, has been in a lot of projects, has been in a lot of different things, and has experience in various of different things as well. And you need maybe help in a certain specific thing. You maybe need a help in specific direction, and you may need help in specific challenge. And fractional CTO is a great person to have. And startups and scale ups, it's mostly like a good fit for a fractional CTO. And the reason is what Sergio mentioned, right? You get a very good experienced person, and it's hard to actually it's hard for companies to afford such an experienced person full time. And you need experience if you want to have a product that is going to be successful in the market. What about what are your recommendations for, let's say, a specific, let's say, engineer or engineering leader on how could they become a fractional CTO?
Yeah, so I don't pretend to give you a recipe like these are the 5 steps to take to become a fractional CTO, because I don't think that exists. So I'd rather give you 2 things. Like, one is how not to become a fractional CTO, and then I can tell you how I became a fractional CTO, which I think is a more honest way to approach the problem. Now, how not to become a fractional CTO? Don't try to become a fractional CTO if you've never been a CTO before, right? So making it an easy way to kind of skip steps is not going to be success, because as we said before, companies typically look for experience, ability to solve problems that the person has seen before. And if you're trying to just brand yourself a fractional CTO without that experience, you might not be very successful, right? Maybe you are, if you're lucky, but I don't think that's the best way to do it. And then when it comes to my journey, as I said before, I've been 20 years in the industry. I've been covering a lot of leadership roles in technology. I've been CTO of small teams. I've been VP of engineering, but with CTOs reporting to me in different countries. So I've been both in the startup, scale up, and corporate environments. And I spent a lot of time there. I lost all my hairs in those different realities. And that gave me a lot of perspective, right? I've seen what works in small environments, what works and doesn't work in big environments. I've seen a lot of things. And then, literally at the end of last year, I took an important decision about my life. I wanted to kind of get out of the traditional 9 to 5 work setup. And I thought, with the experience that I've been accumulating, I believe there is a market for me to promote my services and sell my services individually. And that's what I've been doing since January. I currently have 1 fractional CTO engagement plus other more like consultancy advisory type of roles. And I also believe, by the way, that it's probably very difficult to have more than 1, maximum 2 fractional CTO engagements going on at the same time, because even though that's only part-time, there's a lot of context required for you to understand the company. And if you have to jump between different companies, being able to zoom in and zoom out at that level, it might be too much cognitive load. So I think, probably from my side, 1 is fantastic, and then I combine that with other activities.
Yeah, really good point. That is one of the advantages of being a fractional CTO. You're never just a fractional CTO, right? Companies need a lot of other things, like maybe they need just advising, and maybe they don't even need a fractional CTO. Maybe they need just some direction. Maybe they just need a specific consultancy on a specific thing. Maybe it's a buy versus build decision. Maybe it's a team decision. Maybe it's either specific management decision, or maybe they need a full-time CTO. A lot of times we are consultants and advisors, and we need to find what is the best for the company. It could be potentially, in the best intentions that it's not always the best thing to do if someone approaches you and says, okay, I need a fractional CTO, and then you immediately we become a fractional CTO. You need to find out what actually is a pain point for that company, right? And yeah, you mentioned really a good point about how to become a fractional CTO. You want to become a full-time CTO first. You wanna build that experience. I'm not saying you need to be a CTO first, but you can be like a VP of engineering. You can be also like a director, but I would recommend at least to have some startup experience, because fractional CTOs are a lot on startups and scale ups. Though those are the main two, how do I say, companies, main two specific size of companies. They're looking for such roles. So you need experience in this particular field. If you're just going to be in big tech, a manager in big tech, it's going to be harder for you to actually like try and provide your best your opinions and also help the companies as much as possible, because big tech and startups is a different way of working. I wrote an article not so long ago about how to become a CTO. I will be pasting this in the chat, and there are 6 different ways on the way that you can become a CTO. There's for example, you can start your own company. You can become a founding engineer. You can go through the management path. You go through the architecture path. Go through the IC path as well, and you can become like a CTO through other roles as well, mostly product. So definitely read this article if you're interested about becoming a CTO. And then my recommendation is you get experience, and after some time you can decide if you want to become a fractional CTO.
Yeah, if I may, Greg,
Yeah,
because this is very interesting, a couple of comments here quickly.
sure.
One is I never made my goal to become a fractional CTO. I
Hmm.
don't care about being a fractional CTO. I care about
Yeah.
solving problems that can be solved with my expertise, right? And
Hmm.
it happens that right now some companies are looking for fractional CTOs, but I don't necessarily advertise myself as a fractional CTO. I advertise
Yeah.
myself as an expert, and I have a broad set of experience. I don't care only about technology. I care a lot about business, product, etc. And this
Hmm.
touches the second element that I want to share, which is I agree with you that having been a CTO might be too hard of a requirement, but there's an important element here, though, that is having experience being in an executive team is,
Hmm.
for me, fundamental to be successful in this type of role. Because,
Yeah.
for instance, in the fractional CTO role I'm having right now, I spend a lot of time with the CEO, and I advise the CEO on topics that go way beyond technology, right? And we discuss a lot about company strategies, business strategies, how to deal with strategic partners and whatnot. And if you've never done that before, you might just try to stay in the comfort zone of technology, and
Hmm.
then you will
Hmm.
lose out on actually one of the big advantages of having an experienced CTO, which is, they can go beyond technology. They are actually business leaders who understand technology.
Yeah, well said about experience in leadership teams. That's very important. You should treat your team not like your engineering team, but the team is actually your C-suite. That is your
Exactly.
team, and you should know and understand to speak business language, not only technical language and engineering language that you all love to speak about, but you need to speak in a way that resonates with non-technical people. Awesome, really great point, Sergio. Let's go to the next one, which is we're going to talk about your priorities as a fractional CTO, and how do you actually can structure your percentages of time. What are your top 3 weekly priorities as a fractional CTO?
Yeah. So as always with this, those percentages are approximate. That's why I put 20 to 40%, because depending on the stage you're in, you might focus more on one area than others. And it can be that you're actually spending 40% time on each one of them, meaning that you might have bursts of activity that go beyond 100%. But typically, ideally not, but there are those exceptions. But
Yeah.
in a way, I think about these 3 buckets: everything around strategic planning and alignment, which is a lot of working horizontally with your peers and with the CEO to understand and refine business priorities. So working together, iterating on what we want to achieve, how can we get there, alternative ways to get there, different ways to kind of maybe do it easier or more easily or less expensive, which is directly connected with an architecture and system designs, which is basically kind of the consequence of once you have clear business strategy, then you start thinking about the tech strategy and how you translate that into the systems and that you're going to build. And then very important, figuring out sequencing, right? Not at the micro level, but really at the macro level. What are the key things we need to get first in order to be able to build on top of them? So priorities and trade-offs. How do we sacrifice some important things in the short term to be able to have better results in the long term? The second pillar is more around execution. All right, so you can think strategy and then tactics, or execution if you prefer. How do you then translate the long-term plans into actionable plans for short-term horizon, be it iterations, sprints, whatever you call it, but like those short-term horizons, 1-2 weeks, and maybe even 3-4 weeks, always looking ahead a bit. Tracking and communicating upward, downwards, and sideways on progress is very important to make sure that everybody's aware of what is going on, and especially the progress that is being made and what they can expect next. And then all low-level technical decisions, PR reviews, and other types of hands-on work. By this, I'm not saying that I, as a fractional CTO, I'm responsible for all of them directly. I'm responsible for them to happen, right? Which means that there's a lot of delegation, there's a lot of trusting other people, but also like being on top of what we decide and kind of weighing in with my opinions when I believe it's the right moment to do so. And ultimately, and it's not like in order of priority, it's more like the way I think about it mentally, there is the part around team management and development, making sure that everyone is set up for success. This is like typical job of any manager, every engineering manager. Making space for individual conversation to surface employees' needs and desires for growth, right? All those one-to-one conversations, understand where they want to go, and finding ways to get there while catering for the company needs. And then finally, teaming up with team members on specific needs, right? Doing pair programming sessions, or actually, sitting down to do some design together, depending on the support they need and the priorities in the company, right? This is kind of where you get more hands-on with the work. But typically also, as a fractional CTO, hands-on work is probably the part that you have the least time for, because hands-on work is what you can delegate to others. All the other pieces you probably shouldn't, because if you do, then you're probably getting a better result.
Yeah, you mentioned quite a lot of things, and yeah, it's important to know, right? What is the most impactful thing for specific, either week or specific month. And you mentioned that hands-on work is something that typically, as a fractional CTO, you try to delegate. But how do you actually like find out what is the biggest impact that you can deliver, like as a fractional CTO to the specific week, to specific month? Do you check in with specific business challenges? Do you check OKRs? Are there OKRs across the company? How do you find out what is the impact radar that you develop over the years?
Yeah, so I like this term impact radar. I'm gonna steal it, by the way. Never used it before, but I really like it. So it really depends on the company, right? Because typically, as a fractional CTO, you're joining a company that exists already, right? Meaning that there are things in place, and you need to pick your fights, right? If you're a full-time CTO, you probably have a lot of bandwidth to actually try to change the way the entire company works. When you're a fractional CTO, you have less bandwidth for that. So you need to be able to figure out, okay, there are certain things that probably could be better, but I really want to focus on what I can influence most with my limited time. And here, I think, definitely working very closely with the CEO and the chief product officer, if there is such a role. Sometimes the CEO is also the CPO, depends, right? To create strong alignment on where we want to go, right? Making sure that is very clear, and asking those difficult questions to force prioritization and trade-offs. Because, of course, if you ask someone what you want, the typical answer is, I want everything, right? But they need to understand that they can't get everything, or they need to understand what is the cost if they want everything. But so having those conversations, being open, not defensive, but actually constructing those conversations, to me is like one of the highest leverage type of activities for me, because then if I'm successful at doing that, I'm increasing the chances of the entire team being successful, because they have a very clear scope, it's a manageable scope, and there are low chances that those priorities will change just because someone changed their mind, because we really spend the time to clarify what should be those priorities. And also we agree that if you want to change those priorities, we should go through a lightweight process, but still should be a process where we, surface why we need to change them and how we approach them. And then some companies use OKRs, some other companies don't use OKRs. With the company I'm working with at the moment, we don't use an OKR because we're actually building a new product and we have a hard deadline. So this is a typical case of fixed date and variable scope. So there the goal is actually we need to get live at a certain date with something that works. And almost weekly, we need to have those conversations about how we adjust the scope based on what we're learning to make sure that we're always focusing on the most important things and that we're always pushing down the priority list, those that, will be good to have, but we can live without them. And then, this is very important. And again, making sure that all those conversations are shared in a way that makes it easier for the rest of the team to digest them without having to spend too much time going through the same conversation, right? So summarizing and giving updates that are clear, that are spot on, and then making sure that all the relevant tools are aligned in terms of documentation, in terms of issue tracking, et cetera, so that people we reduce chances of people working on the wrong thing, because especially in these stages of a company being early stage, trying to get to product market fit, every minute counts because you're basically burning money, right? And where zero interest rate policy is over, so burning money in these days is actually very expensive, not as it used to be 3 years ago. So it is for me, it's like probably one of the most important things is finding this balance of ROI based on where the business would like to go and based on what we can actually achieve with the resources we have available.
Yeah, you mentioned a really good point about having a fixed deadline and variable scope. I'm a big fan of that because it really shifts our mindset to not to perfect, but actually remove unnecessary clutter and try to simplify as much as possible. And that worked quite well for me in a lot of cases, especially in freelance projects, freelance opportunities that I worked with. It worked tremendously. Whenever a client or business, they need a certain deadline, they need a certain time when they can expect something to be finished, but they don't expect perfection, and also the customer is not expecting perfection, and also the user is not expecting that it's going to be perfect. It's in the especially the first delivery of a product, it needs to be good enough in order to showcase the value, and it should not be like the full-fledged product that you see, for example, right now, like Spotify. Spotify built this product over the years. They didn't start with all the features that they have right now. So yeah, good points about prioritizing. By the way,
I would say just
yeah,
one last thing on this, like part of that work is also making very explicit what are the assumptions we want to validate with the first product, right? Because sometimes, sometimes there's still this idea that we can get to perfection in the first iteration. We know that's untrue or very unlikely. You might be very lucky, but I don't want to bet on luck. I prefer to bet on like systems that work. So for me, it's very important to say now what we want to do, what we want to learn with this launch, and let's make sure that we prioritize those learnings, even though it might mean that the product is not getting the traction that we ideally want, but we want to get confirmation or discard certain hypotheses, and then we can actually build on top of those.
Yeah, and you know what I say, if you're not at least slightly embarrassed by the MVP, you have launched too late, right? And you learn from the things that you try. You don't learn from the things that you don't try, right? You miss out the opportunities if you actually don't try. You don't know if you don't ever actually put it out. You don't know what is the feedback going to be. That's the reality. You want to fail fast and learn from it fast and make a next iteration. Awesome. By the way, everyone, make sure to, if you have any questions, put it in the chat. There's gonna be one question who's gonna get also a T-shirt at the end of the session. So make sure to add any questions you guys have in the chat. Let's continue with the skills, top skills that help you, Sergio, in your role as a fractional CTO. Could you share like what are your top skills that you need to develop in order to be successful in your role?
And again, I'm relating to my own experience. I don't believe these skills are absolute, right? Because there are different nuances in the industry. But what has helped me is definitely on the first pillar is the ability to understand and speak the business language, right? In the past, I've been spending a lot of time in executive teams. I've also been part of a board of directors for one company for about a year. So I learned a lot to actually immerse myself in those conversations, speak the same language, and become curious about it, because then you learn a lot about what you should focus on as a CTO. And then the ability to make trade-offs, right? Sacrificing good things for great outcomes. No, we all would like to have everything right now, but because everything is good, right? But what is great, right? Focus on what is great, and that forces you to sacrifice something that is good or just push it for later. And it's painful, but you need to learn how to do that. Otherwise, you will never be able to be an effective decision maker. On the execution side, I think attention to detail. So this ability, mentioned also later, like to zoom in, getting into the details without micromanaging on every single piece. But when there are important details, you need to be able to actually zoom in and use all your technical knowledge to be able to understand them. Communicating, repeating, right? You should learn to repeat things multiple times over until they sink in, because attention span these days is just declining continually. So it's very, very important that you keep repeating the things that are important until
especially in a remote environment.
Exactly, in a remote environment even more, because written communication has less bandwidth or intensity of information as opposed to oral communication. And then, as I said, zooming out, zooming in, meaning that this ability to go very high level, think big picture, but then zoom in into a specific detail and understand how they connect with each other is super important. And then when it comes to team management and development, there's the casting piece. So being able to select the right profiles, because as a fractional CTO, you need to delegate even more than a full-time CTO, right? So you need to be able to have, I believe that at least what's working for me is that having a higher seniority density in my team is what works better, because I know I can delegate certain aspects to other people. Active listening, as usual, right? Very important to be able to understand what is going on and asking those insightful questions to surface, potential hidden fires. And then coaching and mentoring, right? Coaching and mentoring are two different things. We put them together, but basically, mentoring is more about teaching people how to do things based on your experience, and coaching is actually helping them figure out solutions, even if you don't really necessarily know yourself what the solution should be. I think these are the kind of skills that has been helpful for me. The list could be 10 times bigger, right? But again, sacrificing good things for great outcomes, these are the ones that have been great in my case.
Yeah, it's you can see the broadness of specific skills that you need to be successful. You need to be a good generalist. That's what I like to say. That has like experience in a variety of different things. And I think technology and details like coding expertise is just like a really small percentage. Would you agree with me, Sergio? Like the importance of your role, like understanding the really fine details. It's more important that you have experience in high level details, architecture, system design in general, but not so much like in a code specific, language specific knowledge.
You don't need, if you need to be an expert on the language, it means that you have a casting issue. That's my view, right? I mean, if you have to do it yourself, it means that if there is nobody else who can do it, you have a casting issue. It doesn't mean that you should not be able to do it, right? To me, there's a big difference between being able to do something and having to do something, right? I think that as a fractional CTO, if you have to do it, you need to shift your focus on figuring out how to structure your team so that you don't have to do it again. But then still being able to do it can be helpful in those situations.
Well said. Let's now talk about how can specifically like a person with 5 years, how can they get better at this specific skill set? We mentioned variety, like a lot of different skills. How can like a person like an engineering leader with 5 years of experience, how can they progress in the specific skills?
Yeah, so again, looking at those three buckets or pillars on the strategy side, I think learning how to speak the business language is very important. And I speak multiple languages, like actual spoken languages, because I've been traveling around the world. The only way I was able to learn languages was by practicing them, right? I'm very bad at learning languages by just reading a book and try to learn grammars. And I realized that that's how kids learn. And the same goes with business. Don't read business books only. Well, that's always useful to do it. But if you believe you're going to learn it by just reading business books, you're probably going to miss out on 90% of the benefits. So actually speak that language with people who speak that language every day. Right? So speak to your CEO, your CFO, CPO, CMO, depending on the roles you have in the organization. Actively dedicate time to talking with them, not to tell them about technology, but actually to learn about what they're doing. Right? and figure out ways you can frame what you're doing in technology in business terms. I remember a fantastic conversation I had during my role as a CTO down in Mexico in 2014-15, I think it was. I had lunch with the CFO who wanted to understand why it made sense for us to migrate from on-premise to cloud from a financial perspective. Because actually, no, OpEx wasn't going to grow, CapEx was going to go down. So from an EBITDA perspective, things didn't look good. But then I was able to explain, increase velocity of the team, we reduce cognitive load, we can focus more on developing the business, blah, blah. And he understood that. But if you only look at the numbers and you say, no, cloud is good, whatever, they will not understand. Right? You really need to frame it in terms of what are going to be the benefits for the business, not for you or your team or the vendor. Then practice thinking in terms of outcomes for technical investments. That's actually what we just discussed, right? So this is very important. And then documenting trade-offs and evaluating alternative solutions. We all tend to fall in love with new technologies, new solutions. We all have our favorites, right? It might be a language, might be a framework. Resist the temptation to just push forward your favorite option and actually force yourself to write down the arguments and rationale for why this solution is a good solution to the problem. Therefore, start from the problem first, right? What is the problem you're trying to solve? What are alternative options you can evaluate? What are upsides, downsides of those options? And then figure out what's the best option for you is, right? Then on the execution pillar, very important to get organized. And especially, I really become obsessive with how you use your time, and your team's time. It doesn't mean use 24 hours a day for work. Actually, I'm a big believer on limiting, putting a cap of how much time you want to work, because that forces you to be a lot more effective. There's someone with the microphone open. I don't know who's that. Yeah. Then practice communicating with the written oral form to people with different backgrounds. It could be different countries, different languages, etc. So learning how you communicate effectively to people that don't necessarily share your same background. And it goes back also to speaking with people in different areas in the company. And then also use writing as a way to clarify your thinking, right? That is something both you, Greg, and I probably do a lot, right? And we learned that by doing that, you actually get better thinking, because when you write something and then you read it back, it needs to be clear, otherwise it really sounds very bad. So the more you do that, the more you realize how you can write clearly in a short form and very concise. And then on the team management side, spending time with people in your team and really developing a genuine interest in them as a person, not just as employees, right? So really understand, what motivates them, what do they like to do, what are their passions, build that rapport, because that rapport is going to be the base for trust, and trust is going to be the base for you to actually have constructive conversations. Also, might sound counterintuitive, but overcome the fear of being perceived as micromanaging. I've seen leaders failing because of this fear, and they become too distant, and therefore they're actually not on top of what they should, and they don't know what is going on in their team. As long as you're explaining why you're taking certain decisions and why you believe that you need to take certain decisions, it's perfectly fine to do so, right? Now, the problem is that if you do that 90% of the time, that means you have a problem with delegation, which leads us to the next point, which is practicing giving up the driving seat and take the passenger seat, which means, learn how to delegate effectively to people in your team. Delegating doesn't mean giving up completely, right? Accountability is still with you. You need to make sure that the person has all the information and that you're giving the right level of information for them to be successful. And then you follow up. You follow up with them, you oversee, you supervise, you check if they're doing a good job. And the more that happens, the more you can become disconnected, or the more you can delegate with a specific person, and you have the entire team grow, right? This has been ways for me to practice important skills, like deliberate practice to become better at my job.
Awesome. I'll just address 2 points that you mentioned, and then we'll go straight to the Q&A. We are getting a bit out of time, but we will make sure we also take some time for questions as well. So yeah, you mentioned writing online. It's it's been so much beneficial ever since I started writing online. I've been able to communicate a lot more clearly about specific things to my team and also to the leadership and stakeholders. I wouldn't be able to do that if I wouldn't be, being able to put clearly my words into the articles. That's a huge factor, and I recommend everyone, to at least try to write somewhere, either a blog, a newsletter, or something. It will really, help not only with knowledge and helping with communication, but also with personal brand in general. And the second thing, a lot of this stuff that you mentioned, I wouldn't be able to develop a lot of these skills that you mentioned without freelance work that I did over the years. And I was working freelance at the same time as doing full-time roles. And I specifically worked on project that involves non-technical people, non-technical clients, and I needed to develop like an application, a website, or something else for them. And if I wouldn't be able to communicate clearly in a way that it resonates with them, they wouldn't be hiring me. If I would be just, okay, we will pick React, I'm going to do this with this database, this is how long it's going to take, and I wouldn't be trying to actually, be helpful and actually find the right solution to them. What are the needs? Amazing. I see a lot of really good questions in the chat. We will get straight to them. But first, before we get to them, I just want to mention that I have a course here on Maven. It's called Senior Engineer to Lead, Grow and Thrive in the Role. If you want to learn the skill set in order to grow from engineer to leader, we start on November 12th, and the second option is on January 21st. There's also a 25% discount for all of you guys here. It's code Lightning. You can either scan this QR code, or also here is the link to where you can enroll to the course. Okay, let's get straight to the Q&A. I see a lot of really good questions here. I see one question that stands out, and I believe you have also the most of the thumbs ups. So Dinesh Adit Khan, make sure to send your LinkedIn in the chat. I will contact you after this session, and I will give you a free t-shirt. Congrats to you. The question is, how do you set boundaries on your time so that company does not expect your availability full time? Sergio, you want to answer this one?
I love this question, Dinesh. I think you really deserve that t-shirt. Well done. I think it's just one notch above what you should normally do as part of your daily job, right? So as part of your daily job, you need to set expectations for your availability, right? Especially when you're working remotely. In my case, I'm being very explicit with the company that I'm working with, for instance. I have like one full day completely dedicated to them. So, on that day, I'm going to be 100% dedicated to working with you. And then I have a few other hours that I spread along the week to check in, to make sure that things are working and progressing. That means that we need to work asynchronously, and that means that all the meetings are usually scheduled on the day that I'm available. Right? So people know that I'm there synchronously on those days, and they know that at least once a day I will check in to check on other things. And here, what is important is it's a very important concept I learned recently, which is that clarity trumps availability. Meaning that if people know when to expect a follow-up from you, they will have peace of mind. When they don't know, that's when immediate availability becomes very important. Right? Typically, companies that don't have a structured process tend to favor like on-the-spot communication, because that's the only way to deal with it. So you basically need to establish those processes. There's always an element of negotiation, right? So maybe one company says, I prefer you to be available 2 half days a week because of reasons, right? And then you need to get to compromise. Make sure you also educate the company on the cost of context switch. We can have a single lecture only on that topic, but we don't have time for that. But the more you context switch, the less effective you are. So that's why, for instance, in my case, I prefer to have at least one full day where I can really go deep on a single topic, quote unquote, even though it's multiple topics.
Sergio, are you here?
Context switch, and once they know when you're available, you're gonna be set.
Okay, we lost you for a second, but you're right back. You're right back with us. Yeah, Dinesh, if you have any sub questions, feel free to add. Also, please make sure to add your LinkedIn so I can contact you after the event. I will just add here one thing, which is what really helps me, is daily goals and weekly goals. If I know what my daily goal is, if I'm able to achieve that, I would be more than happy. If I fail with a lot of other stuff, if my daily goal is achieved, that is really important. And yeah, boundaries. You need to set up your calendar. You need to make sure that your calendar is very clear on when are you available and when you're not available. That's also very important. Maker time, manager time. If you're full-time role, if you're in fractional role, you need to have your your calendar as a way to set boundaries. Awesome. Let's go to Juan Pablo Chapa. We've been seeing fractional CTO work requested much more frequently this year. Are you also seeing this? What do you attribute to this uptick to? Sergio, what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, so I haven't been having a lot of conversations myself lately, also mainly because I'm not looking for new engagement. So I'm relatively booked right now. So I will try to answer the second part of the question. I think that there's been a lot of talks about fractional CTO. There are hype waves in this industry. We know that, right? We've seen who does remember Web 2.0? Who does remember big data, right? There are periods where certain terms and labels become very hype. And I think many companies are trying to explore these new concepts because what often happens in the startup and scale-up industry is that CEOs speak to other CEOs, they discover that they're doing something, they want to try the same thing. So I'm attributing this to that, but that's just my speculation. I don't really know. I didn't do a thorough research, so don't quote me on this. It's just the way I think about it.
Yeah, my take on this is a lot of people, especially I've seen a lot of uptick in non-technical founders. They're starting their startups, and it's becoming very popular to find a fractional CTO, which help them to guide them with technical decisions, and then they're either is hired a offshore team. Normally, it's an offshore team, like if we were talking United States, because a lot of startups are from San Francisco, and because offshore team is then a lot less costly than if you would hire inside the United States. But normally, a fractional CTO is the one that is going to be handling the overall vision regarding the technology. But then that person has enough experience that is able to lead a team in order to build the right things. That is, I see a lot of uptick in the recent, let's call it last year, this year. And I think that's where it comes like a lot of popularity regarding fractional CTOs. Let's talk about pricing and let's talk about equity. This is Dustin's question. How do you price your services, and also should you take equity as a fractional CTO? You wanna answer this one, Sergio?
Yeah, so this is very interesting. There is always an element of magic on the pricing side. The way I do it, the way I've done it has been twofold. On one side, I've been talking to other people, right? Not necessarily fractional CTOs, but I've been talking to people I know coming from similar industries who've been making the move of going from full-time employees to the more advisory type of work, understanding what are the fees that the market seems to be accepting. Right? That was the first step I took. The second step I took was testing the market myself, right? Before leaving my full-time job, similar to what Greg did, I was doing some freelance consulting to see, what is the willingness of companies to pay for my services and how much are they willing to pay. So I've been testing that, and basically I've been reaching a certain level where I'm comfortable with. And over time, I will try to test pushing it, right? Trying to see what is the pain level for prices that becomes counterproductive. The other thing, it's a bit less relevant for the fractional CTO, but I also realized that I'm actually now applying different fees depending on if I'm working with companies, so B2B clients, or if I'm doing mentoring and coaching to individuals, because I'm doing that as well. It's an important part of my job. There's different ability to pay, right? The spending ability is different when it's a company or an individual. So I'm actually kind of fluctuating my prices based on that. And I'm constantly experimenting, trying to figure out things. When it comes to equity, that's a very good discussion because sometimes I've seen, mostly from people I've been talking to, it didn't happen to me, but I've seen in some cases the approach of trying to offer equity instead of cash for fractional roles. I don't know if I like that personally, right? And let me explain why. As a fractional CTO, you're already dealing with uncertainty, right? You don't have a full-time job. You're not employed 24 no, 5 days a week or whatever. So you're taking a certain level of risk on your end. That justifies also why you are, maybe having higher fees than you compare with the normal salary, because there's no job security associated with that. There's less cost for the company in terms of overhead cost. Secondly, a fractional CTO, in my view, is supposed to be a temporary gig, right? You don't want a fractional CTO to be permanent. So I see the equity discussion, and I'm having a similar conversation, but I see the equity discussion coming in at a certain point if there is a willingness on both sides to make this more of a permanent role, right? Starting with equity as a way to keep costs low, no, I'm not comfortable with because I still need to pay the bills, and again, this is going to be a short-term engagement. Equity comes in the long term. I need to manage my finances. It really depends. Again, if you want to do the fractional role as a way to get in and potentially increase, then probably discussing an equity component can make sense. But I wouldn't be too stressed about doing it early on. I would try to say, no, let's focus on having a cash component that we are both comfortable with. And you can also play, by the way, and then I'll shut up because I am speaking too much, but you can also play the argument of, if you want me to commit to supporting you, I need to be comfortable with the level of pay, because otherwise, as soon as I get another client who's willing to pay the fees I want, instead of giving me equity, I'll probably jump ship, right? So there's an element of keeping you engaged for at least the duration of the contract, which is very important. It's a way to kind of balance risk on both sides.
Yeah, awesome answer to this one. You mentioned basically everything I had in mind. It's a short term, it's a temporary role, similar to interim CTO. It's not a long term, and if unless you have plans to go either to a full time, extend to full time CTO, then equity is normally not the case that fractional CTOs would be looking for. Yeah, well, really good analytic answer, Sergio. Let's take one more question, and then we will need to cut it. We will need to end it. Sergio, which question do you like? Which one should we take?
I picked the question, you answer it then. Let's do this. I like this one from Mariana. Actually, she got a lot of votes. How much hours per week do you work as a fractional CTO? How do you keep control of it with the company?
All right, you want to answer this one?
Do you want to try first?
Yeah,
I
of
picked
course.
the question, you try the answer.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, for me, the good thing about being, either being a fractional CTO, you can do a lot of different stuff. You normally don't do just fractional CTO, as Sergio mentioned. I'm doing a lot of advising. I'm doing a lot of consultancies at the moment, and I'm working with, let's say, four to five different companies right now, and also with different people, coaching and mentoring. Normally what I do is I try to dedicate at least 10 hours per company at the moment. And if it's less, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But if it's 10 hours per month, it's good enough. You can do a lot in that time. So it really depends how much hours per week should you work. Like, for example, like a normal, if there's like just a fractional CTO position for a startup that wants to deliver their first MVP, I would normally go about 30% of time, 30% per week. That's like 10 to 15 hours per week. And yeah, how do you keep control of it with the company? As Sergio mentioned, you need to provide when do you work, when do you not work, what is your balance, which days are you working, are you online all the time to answer questions? I prefer to be there in case there's any emergencies or any problems, but I'm not always going to jump on a meeting if there's like outside of my working hours. So I try to be as strict as possible with my calendar and ruthlessly prioritize. But yeah, as a good thing is being like a fractional CTO, you can do a lot of different stuff, and companies don't need always just a fractional CTO. Being a freelancer for more than 10 years, I work from whole project just to helping on specific thing, just doing solution design, working on system architecture, working on team management, on hiring. I was also hired just for conducting a hiring process for a certain role and so on. So there's many different things that you can do in this case. You want to add something, Sergio?
Yeah, no, I think you covered it very well, and maybe a bit of a nuance on the question from Mariana about how you keep control of it with the company. I think there is an element of trust there. right? Where no, I do timesheets, but I do them mostly for myself because I want to account for the time I spend with the different companies. But then I don't send with the client to the clients the timesheet. I just send the invoice with a certain amount. And typically, when it's a fractional CTO role, which is like a fixed amount of time per month, we just agree on a forfeit payment, right? A certain fee that is for the month, and then I try to gauge my time, right? Sometimes I do more than that, sometimes I do less than that, and I try to always focus on what is the most important thing to do with this client. And we generally work well there because there is both transparency but also trust. But if they reach out to me and actually touching a bit on another question, what I'm seeing is that most of my clients are coming from network or referrals, right? So generally the level of trust is already relatively high because they know you from somehow, right? Because they met you, they work with you, or someone recommended you. So you don't start from, I want to make sure that you're actually giving me the hours that you're promising. They are more about, and I want to make sure that we're getting to the results that I'm hiring you for.
Yeah, well said. It's a lot more is important, as I have seen, like the actual word of mouth from happy customers, happy clients, and that's why I like to say reputation is very important in this field. You don't want to burn any bridges in this field, and a lot of actual work is coming from referrals, and is coming from recurring companies, recurring people. Um, that is the gist of I would say any freelancer out there, or any person trying to get to becoming a fractional CTO, develop a good reputation, do good work, and that is going to get you more work. That's normally how I see, and that normally how it works as well in my case. Awesome. Thanks everyone. Thanks also to you, Sergio, for being here with us. A lot of interesting insights from you, Anthony. There's going to be recording about for this session. You can find the recording on this landing page where you subscribed when you signed up for the event. So all of you guys will be able to watch the recording as well. I think you will also get an email with the recording. So you guys will be able to watch this again after. If you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn and let us know. Let us know if there's anything you guys are thinking about. We couldn't get into every specific question, but really awesome questions from all of you guys, and appreciate all of you joining. And wish you guys all a great rest of the day. And let us know if there's anything on LinkedIn. Contact us. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for your time.